Good morning and welcome to the Evan R. Liblit Memorial Scholarship Committee's third Waste on Wednesday seminar. My name is Mike Engelman and I am pleased to serve as the moderator for today. Before we get started, I'd like to take a minute to remind everybody about the Liblit Scholarship Committee and what we do. Evan Liblit was a highly respected recycling waste professional who passed away at the age of 47 in 1995. Evan worked for the EPA, the DEC, Town of Babylon, a private recycling company, and he also found time to teach. While working for the EPA in Manhattan, he organized an office paper recycling program for federal buildings. The EPA then loaned him to the DEC in 1997, where he was sent to Albany to craft the state's first recycling plan. Evan also helped form what grew to become the Association of Long Island Recycling Officials. After his passing, a number of his colleagues created a scholarship fund at Stony Brook University to continue his legacy. Over the last 22 years, the scholarship fund has provided scholarships to 21 graduate students and 16 undergraduate students, many have gone on to become leaders in their field and are joining us here today. Some are even providing technical assistance. Scholarship funds are raised at an annual breakfast held around America Recycles Day in November and at the Federation Solid Waste Conference each May. As we all know, COVID-19 has impacted just about every aspect of our lives and how we now do business. And unfortunately, fundraising efforts to support the scholarships and events this year have been impacted. So if you are able, please consider supporting or sponsoring the Evan R. Liblit Scholarship Fund. One final point, I'd be remiss in not mentioning that although I never had the pleasure of personally knowing Evan during my nearly 25 professional year career, most of us agree that Evan's legacy is alive and well in the bright minds of the men and women that the scholarship serves. Thank you. So as many of you know, last year was the first Liblit Symposium at Stony Brook with a capacity crowd to discuss the recycling crisis. This year we had organized the second symposium to be held in mid-March just as the pandemic was taking hold. Like others, we were forced to be more creative to keep the dialogue and hopefully actions moving forward on these important waste and recycling issues. As a result, we planned 6 of these Zoom webinars. Today is the third installment. In terms of logistics, we will mute everyone except for the speakers. If you have any questions, please enter them into the chat box. Hopefully you can see that at the bottom of your screen. And we will try to get them grouped together and ask them of the speakers at the end of the town presentations. Today's session will provide a municipal update from towns across Long Island on the subject of waste management. Our guest speakers include representatives from the towns of North Hempstead, Huntington, Babylon, Islip, Brookhaven, SOUTHOLD, and Smithtown. So for it's worth reviewing a little bit about Long Island. Before we have our municipal updates, to provide some context on the challenges that we're facing in our communities. When we talk about Long Island, nothing against New York City, Queens and Brooklyn, but for today we're just talking about Nassau and Suffolk counties. The area of those counties is 2,800 square miles, which is greater than 2 states, 2 small states. The more significant of these statistics is the population. That is greater than 2.8 million people, which is larger than 16 states, as is the number of households, greater than 935,000. Nassau and Suffolk comprised of 13 townships, 3 in Nassau, 10 in Suffolk, North Hempstead, Hempstead, Oyster Bay, in Nassau, the 5 western towns in Suffolk, Huntington, Smithtown, Islip, Babylon, Brookhaven. The west and to the east, we have SOUTHOLD, Riverhead, Shelter Island, East Hampton, and Southampton. We have 2 cities in Nassau, Glen Cove and Long Beach, and over 90 incorporated villages in Nassau and Suffolk. I am not going to name them, I don't know them all. We also have countless special districts, including sanitary districts and authorities, including waste authorities throughout Long Island. Collectively, we make up what is known as Region 1 in New York State DEC. There are at least 15 New York State solid waste planning units, intermunicipal cooperation among the incorporated villages. I think there's even a few towns that might even partner for their solid waste management plans. And from a residential standpoint, Nassau and Suffolk annually generate in excess of 1.6 million tons of municipal solid waste. Solid waste just from residents that are generated and processed at energy from waste facilities, Atlanta, on Long Island at any of those 4 facilities, or it's shipped off island via truck to distant landfills and faraway transfer stations. We also generate in excess of 500,000 tons of recyclables that are processed at permitted recyclable handling facilities on Long Island or are shipped off of Long Island. A typical municipal waste operation includes the curbside collection and disposal of curbside garbage through public and private workforces. It varies by town. If they have municipal workers or private contractors under a separate procurement to pick up garbage. Most towns have 2-day-a-week collection. There are some communities in Nassau that have 3-day-a-week collection, but it's important to note that none of this works for any town without a public and private partnership. That we know for certain, that almost every town has some combination of public and private workers. The same goes for the collection and handling of recyclables. It does vary by town or community, but most of them are dual stream, single stream. Some have separate collection methods for glass. Continuing with the municipal operations, most waste management departments are charged with the collection of curbside yard waste from residents in the form of bagged or unbagged leaves, brush and tree debris, hopefully not land clearing debris. And this has been most recently highlighted by the tropical storm that we had 2 weeks ago, which here locally in Smithtown has created some issues for us. We also oversee household hazardous waste collection events, either by a third-party contractor. There are some towns like Brookhaven and Huntington that have their own drop-off centers. We also handle e-waste. The state modified the electronic waste recycling law on January 1st, 2015. Many towns are now providing curbside collection of e-waste, along with other specialized waste such as bulk items, appliances, which may require freon recovery, compact fluorescent bulbs, and thermostats, mercury-containing devices. Most towns do not collect construction and demolition debris from the curb. However, they do provide methods for disposal, whether it's drop-off at a town facility or transfer station, registered facility, typically just for residents. There are some that allow commercial C&D drop-off. In addition to that, most of these functions occur at transfer stations or former town landfills. Nobody really has any open landfills, with the exception of a few small ones, Brookhaven and Islip, Babylon. And our recycling building operations, either they're processed by municipal workers or they're sent out to private companies through those transfer stations. In addition, most of us are trying our best to educate the public, and whether it be residents or commercial businesses, as well as our actions. Typically, the objectives are simple from an economic and environmental standpoint, and that's an overall responsibility in providing curbside residential refuse collection and recyclables, processing and disposal. And for those of us in government, we have to stay within budgets and tax caps, which is not always easy. Some of us also provide commercial waste disposal and oversight. A few towns have a flow control ordinance, such as town of North Hempstead, where they compel commercial waste to a town facility. Babylon has a waste district, and in Smithtown here, we have a somewhat unique law, a non-residential waste law, which applies to our commercial businesses. We do that, and we also try to maximize our recycling efforts excuse me, both for residents and commercial entities so that we can stay consistent with our local solid waste management plans and help meet the state's objectives on recycling. So as we get to one other point I'd like to make on this is that no matter what, it seems like whether it's a natural disaster or a terrorist attack or most recently this pandemic, the flow and the generation of garbage and recyclables definitely does not stop. Most of us saw this from day one during the pandemic, that there was no change. For most of us, there was an increase in the amount of waste that was left at the curb. And there was certainly no pause button for those of us in the public and private that are dealing with waste management. So these changes for us with the imminent closure of the Brookhaven Landfill, limitations on our transportation infrastructure, whether it be through truck or rail, our limited capacity at existing disposal points, including the 4 Covanta plants on Long Island, or the transfer stations that exist on Long Island also, are making things certainly more difficult for all of us, both in government and on the private side. And we're going to keep the dialogue going, hopefully put something into action to keep us all moving forward. We have an update today from 7 townships in no particular order, myself from Smithtown, town of Brookhaven, town of Huntington, town of Islip, town of North Hempstead, SOUTHOLD, and Babylon. First up, we have the town of North Hempstead, and joining us is, hopefully he can hear us, is Mike Kelly. Mike is the executive director of the town Solid Waste Management Authority. He also serves as the commissioner of waste management. Mike has been in municipal government for 14 years. He's an attorney. He's also been with Nassau County. And most recently, he was counsel to the Solid Waste Management Authority before assuming his role as director. Mike went to Fordham and graduated from St. John's Law School. Mike, can you hear me and take it away?
I can hear you. Hopefully you can hear me.
Thank you
very much, Mike, and thank you for thank you to Stony Brook for setting this up and inviting me to speak here today. I think that the town of North Hempstead's experience with COVID-19 is probably going to be fairly representative of the experiences that other municipalities have had on Long Island. Just to give you an overview of what we saw as far as collections go, at the beginning of the pandemic, and I call that, say, around March 16th or so. For the rest of March, when we would normally have a residential average of 218 tons coming in per day, we saw 275 tons coming in on an average, which is a 25% increase. On the same side of things, on the commercial MSW, we would normally see about 170 tons come in a week, and we started seeing 105 tons come in a week for a 37% decrease. That got even worse as April went along. We started seeing numbers in the 80s when commercial establishments started going on pause. C&D was an even more drastic increase. We would normally receive about 38 tons, 39 tons in March. We got to a March low of 16 tons for a 58% decrease, and in April we got down to 9 tons in 1 week for about an 80% decrease in tonnage. So it was a fairly stark. It was a fairly stark increase and decrease depending on what you were talking about. We started seeing that rebound. At least the commercial numbers and the C&D numbers start to rebound about mid-May. And while commercial numbers and residential numbers were rebounding, residential numbers were coming down a little bit. So residential numbers got down to about where they would normally be for that time of the year. Commercial numbers and C&D numbers, they rebounded substantially, but it took a long time for those numbers to come back to where they were. And in fact, all these numbers are as of the end of July, I would say. Of course, as Mike indicated before, the tropical storm really changed things, at least for a couple of weeks, as far as MSW collection went and C&D collection went. We've been getting incredible amounts of MSW coming into the transfer station, and very small amounts of C&D because all the construction work stopped and all the throwing out your refrigerator started. Our collection operations within the town remained relatively stable as time went on throughout the pandemic. We didn't see any interruptions in collections, and I have to credit our collection contractors for that. They did an amazing job throughout the entire pandemic. It's a little bit easier, I suppose, because we use private collection carters as opposed to our own workforce for collections. And I also suppose it's easier to shift around resources during a time like this for a private collector, but things really turned out well. It was something that we were very concerned about at the time, and we're very, very happy that it didn't come to pass. The biggest effects that we had, aside from the differences in collections, were revenue is number one. The Solid Waste Management Authority derives about 70% of its revenue from tipping fees at the transfer station. Even though residential was way up over time, commercial MSW and C&D were way down, and it wasn't enough the residential increases wasn't enough to make up the difference. So we did see a revenue drop off, but we're managing the budget, and it's working out, but it's not doesn't mean it didn't take a lot of hard work to get there. Obviously, because our offices were closed and people were staying at home and working from home, our capital improvement plan at the landfill was delayed a little bit, and some of our transfer station projects delayed a little bit. We're only now getting back on track with that. And we also had to cancel a couple of our household hazardous waste events, which means that the one that we did in July at Westbury High School was very, very well attended, let's say. So overall, we had I should say we had a very different experience, and as opposed to what we would normally have. But I think that we're really kind of getting back to where we would normally be, and hopefully we'll see what happens with yard waste collections as they continue with Tropical Stormy CES. So that's my presentation.
That's great, Mike. Thank you very much for the update. We appreciate it, and I think we're all having similar experiences. Next up, we have from the town of Babylon, Doug Jacob. Doug has worked on the town of Babylon for the town of Babylon and with the town of Babylon for many, many years. He worked on the town of Babylon solid waste management plans and issues since finishing graduate school in 1988, where he was a project manager for a national consulting firm, Hirschman, Brickner, and Bratton. From 1993 until 2004, in addition to being Babylon's town comptroller, Doug was also appointed the solid waste administrator position for the town. And during those turbulent years in the solid waste industry, Doug managed the town's creation and implementation of a commercial garbage district following the Supreme Court ruling of Carbone v. Clarkstown, invalidating flow control laws. For over 25 years, Doug has led the town's development of its solid waste infrastructure, including its ash cells and the procurement of contract negotiations with Covanta on the recycling of Babylon and vendors servicing the town's commercial and residential garbage districts. Since 2007, Doug has served as the president and owner of Red Hill Professional Services, a municipal consulting firm on solid waste and other environmental management programs. Doug and Vicky also, thank you again for participating today. Can you hear me, Doug?
Yes, I can. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, and good morning. Thanks for having us, all of us at Babylon. I see Ron Klusner is also on, our current solid waste administrator and chief of staff, and Vicki Russell, our former commissioner, are all on, so they can chime in a little bit. Just before we get started, I'm in our town hall annex, and I'm sitting maybe 50 feet from where Evan Liblit's office used to be. So we obviously got to know and love Evan for the years that he was here, and his legacy very much lives on here in the town, part of which is fed right into some of the success or not having real crises during this pandemic. Evan was instrumental in helping us form a practically self-contained, self-sustaining solid waste system from collection through disposal. We have a lot of our infrastructure is in-house. Mike mentioned the commercial garbage district. We're the town that we collect virtually all of the commercial waste and all of the residential waste throughout our town, as it shows here, 53 square miles, a little bit over 200,000 residents. We do that through private contractors, all under the auspices of the town, and it's under the control of the town. And a lot of that was put into place after the Carbone decision invalidating flow control. Very quickly, our main facilities, besides two major contracts for the collection of all the solid waste, the anchors to our system is the Covanta Waste Energy Facility, which is sized a little bit larger than all of the waste we generate in the town, which has allowed us to enjoy very successful intermunicipal agreements with lots of the folks here online that are on this conference. And currently, we're many years into a successful intermunicipal agreement with the town of SOUTHOLD, with Jim Bunchuk, who's on the line here too. And in addition to the Covanta facility, we have a couple of very large-scale transfer stations, one owned and run by Omni Recycling of Babylon. I see Anthony Kors on the line here, and the Winters Brothers transfer station. And these are all within, I'd say, about a quarter mile of our Covanta solid waste infrastructure, which is right next to the ash cells that take the ash resulting from the Covanta processing. So we're very self-contained, which allowed us to be very resilient during when this COVID really began. Starting in as Mike said earlier, starting in mid-March, as we suddenly realized that things were really going to change very drastically, very quickly, we convened and really started working on contingency plans. At that point, we didn't know whether some of our residential contractor, collection contractor, whether, that workforce would have gotten hit with COVID and sort of been wiped out. We were working with our public works department to basically provide backup services if needed for the collection of waste. Fortunately, so far, we haven't needed to do that because of the incredible service we get from our residential collection contractor, which is Encon, and our commercial collection contractor, which is Winters Brothers. Both those companies have virtually not missed a beat of the whole 5 months that we've been dealing with this, including, we haven't even mentioned the hurricane or whatever that storm was a couple of weeks ago, which was just a real poke in the eye, right? When we're all sort of getting stable. I think we collected, we incurred another almost $100,000 worth of collection costs just trying to move all this storm debris off the streets, find a right home for it. It all went to Omni without a hitch, but it took a lot of sort of behind the scenes working. In terms of what's going on in terms of collection, like Mike was indicating in North Hempstead, we've experienced about a 13%, this is through July, numbers through July, we experienced about a 13% reduction in the number of tons of commercial waste that we've collected. That obviously fits in what we sort of thought would happen. Somewhat more importantly, or I say more importantly, as a former controller of the town, not only did the waste fall off by 13%, our billing, our revenues, we bill for commercial waste collection every month, and our revenues are off by over 20%, almost $1 million in the 5-month period that we've looked at. Now that very much has started to stabilize. The real worst months were, as everyone can imagine, the real worst months were April and May. It's still off by 10 or more like 15%, but we're starting to see a little bit of recovery. On the residential side, again, like most people would imagine, everybody's home, everyone's, college kids are home, creating a lot of waste or whatever, we're all home. That waste has gone up in this 5-month period by about 10%. And that's all collected by our residential collection company, Encon. That has a little bit different billing structure. So we have not yet taken a economic financial hit on that increase. We haven't had to pay more yet because we bill on a per household, per month basis. We bill it on the tax bill, but that's what it's based on. Encon has just done a phenomenal job, and again, complicated by the hurricane a couple of weeks ago, of literally just picking up everything that we've asked for, and even times when we don't ask, they're out there picking up all this storm debris and taking care of it. So we will be dealing with them on how we're going to manage that contract going forward. But we really, I think our residents and commercial businesses have not seen any real fall off. We haven't really missed a beat. We are starting to see, and we don't know whether this is anecdotal or whether it's real, we've beefed up a little of our enforcement because a lot of businesses are financially distraught now. It took businesses a while to realize, hey, maybe they shouldn't be getting collection because they're closed. But we're a little concerned about the possibility of either illegal dumping or commercial properties which only can be collected by the town's contractor. We're a little worried that, as businesses get tight financially, they're going to maybe want to find some other ways of getting rid of their waste and not pay our rates. It's certainly not epidemic at this point, but we're beefing up our enforcement just to make sure that things that might happen or might, have some pressure happening, that we're going to be on top of that and be able to monitor it really closely. And I know I won't take up too much of our time. So I think one reason we've felt like we've been able to manage this so far and not hit a lot of roadblocks is because we have a very resilient system. During this hurricane, Omni's power got knocked out, like so many places, but Omni got knocked out, but Covanta didn't. And so what happens then is Omni couldn't take stuff, their scale didn't work. We very easily, with the cooperation of Covanta, very easily able to shift. Again, we're within a quarter mile, just several blocks away from each other. We're very easily able to reroute our trucks to go to Covanta, providing they have capacity, obviously, but they have, and they've been able to handle sort of these 1-week problems that we're running into. But over time, it's been one reason that we've been able to continue to do all the processing and collection that we've needed to, because we sort of have this resilient duplicative system that all the pieces work together, mostly because of the management from the town, because of our commissioner, because of Vicky, because of Ron. We have long-term relationships with these companies, and it allows us to very easily bob and weave with sort of the changes that have been going on. So it's been a lot of work, but so far we've landed on our feet so far.
Doug, that's great. Thanks very much. It sounds like you guys have been able to adapt pretty well, and we appreciate you and everybody else from Babylon making the call today. And we will now have an update from town of Huntington. Audrey is hopefully still here. Audrey got her bachelor's and her bachelor's and master's from Stony Brook, and she's been working as the recycling coordinator since June 1989, which is over 30 years. And I believe she's eligible to retire soon. Audrey is in charge of a lot of things, including the recycling contracts. She deals with the private carters, constituents, landfill post-closure obligations, regulatory reporting. I've worked with her. Town of Huntington and Town of Smithtown are intermunicipal partners on a lot of the shared services that we have. Audrey, you there?
I am here. And thank you, Mike. The cat is out of the bag. Yes, I am retiring soon. So
congratulations.
Where should we start? All right. So what I've heard so far sounds similar to what the town of Huntington has experienced vis-a-vis disposal during the pandemic. That's mostly, you know, more people home equals more waste, more recycling. So far, year to date, compared to last year, residential MSW is up about 12%. And bottles and cans, believe it or not, are up over 23%, which is unusual because we've been stepping up our enforcement of unacceptable waste and contaminants, and we've been leaving a lot at the curb, so that's surprising. I'm guessing it's lots of wine bottles like my household generates, you know. LOL. So let's see, yard waste. Again, we just had this storm. I don't have updated figures. Our yard waste was also up about 4%. I think by the time we get all our August yard waste numbers, it's going to be a lot more than that. The highway department did a great job in removing a lot of the large tree debris, but there's a lot of twigs and branches and other smaller storm debris that was put out at the curb that our contract carters have collected. Speaking of the carters, like Mike Kelly had mentioned, the town of Huntington has 5 subcontractors that work for the town as well as small municipal area. They did an awesome job collecting all the extra weight that was at the curb. Probably back March, April, May, they were putting in 11, 12-hour days with drivers and personnel that were sick with COVID and or caring for family members that were ill. And they did a really exemplary job just really trying to keep it pace with the amount of waste that was at the curb. And as Doug Jacob had mentioned, we're beefing up our enforcement as well at the curb because having all these families home 24/7, there's so much more waste and little extra home projects going on. People are really not minding the curbside rules and regulations that they're required to follow when they put debris at the curb. There's a lot of overloading at the curb, and we're trying to, you know, keep the aesthetics of the town and, you know, enforcing that. I'm not really going to speak much about the commercial waste. We did see a bit of a drop, but we don't have flow control when it comes to commercial waste. So any drop in or availability in the resource recovery plant capacity, we fill with spot waste and or contract waste, more like a valve. So of course, when we saw availability, we just opened up the valve for spot waste and contract waste to come in. I think that's mostly it, really. It seems like what Mike Kelly and Doug Jacob had discussed is very similar. Other than that, you know, this increase in all the different components of the waste stream were unplanned and unbudgeted, and we're expecting approximately a $1 million deficit at year end if we can continue at the levels that we're at right now. So that's the one major concern.
Yep. That's a pretty significant number. Thank you very much, Audrey, you and John and Matt. I appreciate the update and all that information. Next, from the town of Islip, we have Commissioner Marty Ballou. Marty is the Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Control. He's also the President of the Islip Resource Recovery Agency. Marty has an extensive career in solid waste management, including being the Director of Bureau of Waste Disposal Engineering, and the Bureau of Recycling for New York City's Department of Sanitation. One of the daunting and somber tasks that Marty was charged with was dealing with all of the management of the material from the 9/11 attacks. And he was ultimately responsible for the operation and closure of Fresh Kills landfill in Staten Island. Marty, are you there?
Yes, I am, Mike. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for inviting me to talk at this seminar. I'm going to talk, maybe fill in a few of the blanks, and first thing is I'm going to talk operations and health and safety of the employees. So when COVID hit, most of it, as we all know, is March was when it really became pronounced. The first thing we did here in Islip is we were concerned about the employees, as everybody is. So we pulled the OSHA guidelines to see what was the guidance document that would help us, to make sure to ensure that none of the employees, received the virus. And one of the things in particular we focused on was the collection part, which according to the OSHA guidelines, they weren't at risk as long as you used the regular PPE or other things that normally is used in the solid waste industry. So we issued all the PPE and gloves and whatnot to all the employees. But, then we started looking at a little more, a little more distinct of what goes on in the operations and who are the employees that are most vulnerable. The first thing we did was the scale operators at the scales. They're the individuals come in direct contact with the public and they're most at risk. So what we did to assist them is we installed additional plexiglass, which created a barrier between them and the public. And, they would just slip the scale tickets under the glass or the plexiglass. We issued them gloves and PPE and the scale. So we did that at the 3 scale sites that we have, the compost, the landfill, and the material recovery facility. Then we looked at the collection unit itself. And we wanted to make sure that, there wasn't the potential for COVID to spread through the employees should one person get it. So essentially what we did on the collection side is we kept the equipment assignments. Well, first of all, let me explain. We have 80 collection districts, of which 72 of them are picked up by the private carters. Okay, 8 of them are picked up by town employees or resource recovery employees. Okay, those 8 districts I'm focusing on. And what we did is we assigned the equipment to the individuals and they kept the same piece of equipment each day, so it was the same individuals. And also we changed their work shift for the collection unit. What we did is, when they finished their route, they were allowed to go home, so they weren't going to be mingling around and the possibility of coming in contact with other people. So that was one of the other items we did. Then we turned to the material recovery facility, which is our recycling facility in the town of Islip. And we changed the process that went on in the recycling facility. As everybody knows, you have conveyor belts and, you have picking that goes on from the conveyor belts. So what we did is we actually stopped the picking process and we changed the facility into essentially a transfer station. This was to protect the employees because the room that the picking occurs for the laborers is, a very small room. There's 6 to 8 people that would be in the room. They'd be in close contact. So what we did is we essentially set up a transfer station that all the material that came in, the metal, glass, and plastic, we would load into trailers and we would send out, we had 2 sites that we bring it to, for a fee. Since this started, in March, it took a couple of months. We're slowly returning back to normal. I mean, right now, what we did is we opened up the conveyors to remove the glass, which is the heaviest component of the metal, glass, and plastic. So we take the glass and we send it to the Blydenburg landfill. You know, it's at no cost to us. It's admixture to cover, so that it reduced our cost of the material that's being sent out to the transfer stations. Okay, next thing we did is, you know, we thought about FEMA, and FEMA, as everybody knows, their start date was January 20th of 2020. And what we did is, you know, you have the normal overtime issue and regular pay issue with FEMA. But in addition, what I'll call is other than personal service. So what we did is we worked out, and this is what we did with FEMA, was that we had additional tonnage. For instance, I'm talking the first submittal was from January 20th to the end of April 30th, okay? And what I did is I calculated the additional tonnage that we received, inclusive of the private carters that went to the incinerator. And I figured out the cost for that, and that's what went into into bills for FEMA. In addition, there's a loss in revenue because we changed the operation at the material recovery facility. You know, we were no longer separating the metal, the number ones, number twos, milk jugs. So there was revenue loss. One of the things that FEMA asked me, which we did, is they wanted a 5-year average, you know, prior to this year. I'm sorry, what? It's a 5-year average so that you can compute really what was the additional material that you got. The other issue is, since we were sorting at the material recovery facility, now we're sending additional material at a higher cost to a couple of the vendors that we were, because the metal's not out of it. So there was an additional tonnage. Just to give you an idea of the first submittal that went into FEMA from January 20th to April 30 for other than personal service, which is really just those few items I talked about, was approximately $700,000 for reimbursement. So that's how we're doing it along. And then, of course, we do the personnel. But, and I'm proud to say is that we have the employees in the solid waste with COVID. So thank you, Mike.
Marty, thanks very much. I appreciate that update. And you're absolutely right that the sentiment, I think, among the towns is that these sanitation workers have absolutely been frontline workers and essential, you know, almost always, but especially these last few months, so that we can leave enough time for the remaining towns. I'll quickly give the update for the town of Smithtown before we move on to Chris in Brookhaven. And I'll just let you know that 2019 was shaping up to be a typical year for us, other than the typical issues that arise. We have we changed recycling programs a couple of years ago. We are now back to dual stream without the collection of glass. We now have glass drop-off locations, which we've been expanding and growing. It seems to be working well for us, and everything was going along until about noon on New Year's Eve, and one of our private contractors told us that beginning the following day, they were no longer going to work under the existing contract. So that's how we started our new year. And then fast forward to March, as everyone's been saying, and almost immediately, we were dealing with another issue. As far as our waste goes, week one, our residential side, we were up 21%, and we had a correlating decrease in our commercial waste of almost 24%. And that continued on, as most people have been saying, for the majority of March, and it began to stabilize more into April and May. So for the year, we are still up about 10% on the residential side. And unfortunately, on the commercial side, we're down 15, 20%, which seems to be reflective of what we're all seeing, the stay-at-home orders and a slow move back towards some kind of normalcy, a new normalcy at least. Same thing with us. Our household hazardous waste events were canceled in April. We did have one in July. Everything we've been doing with our resident drop-off at our municipal services facility is residents masks on. They have to stay in their cars. And our director of sanitation, Neil Sheehan's been doing a great job at managing that facility as well. As Doug said, we sort of were poked in the eye recently with the tropical storm. And, we're now dealing with tens of thousands of cubic yards of vegetative waste. So we'll have a busy few months ahead of us. On the recyclable side, I'll just quickly mention that the commingled has been up about 4% for the year. The paper has been up, paper and cardboard have been up about 13%, and our glass is up like 40%. So my scientific analysis shows that people are drinking wine and shopping on Amazon is what seems to be the result of this pandemic. And we'll see if that continues through the end of the year. So we'll move on to Chris Andrade in the town of Brookhaven. Chris is the commissioner of the town's Department of Recycling and Sustainable Materials, better known as the Department of Waste Management. Chris served as the president of the Islip Resource Recovery Agency and commissioner of Town of Islip's Department of Environmental Control. He's been around for 36 years in the solid waste business, beginning in the early 80s, managing the Blydenburg landfill. And he's worked on many solid waste initiatives, including yard waste composting, recycling, collection and processing, MSW landfilling, waste to energy, capital improvements, you name it. He also witnessed and helped manage multiple solid waste crises, including the Islip garbage barge, as well as the recycling downturn. I've worked closely with Chris since then, and most recently some carting contract defaults. Chris, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks to the Liblit folks too for hosting this. I see there are about 60 people on this call here, on this Zoom. Many of you guys are non-government related people, but a quick shout out to all my colleagues out there. These people have managed their programs through multiple crises over the last year and a half, and it's a credit to the towns for hiring these people, because the last couple of years have been pretty hectic. It seems like the common theme here is the COVID-19 this year. Like many of you, my year started out, with the exception of the card of defaults, started out relatively normal. Things were going fairly well until about March. Everything pretty much shut down for us. Our revenues were down significantly. We rely an awful lot on our landfill revenues. Our revenues were down significantly, and as a result of that, like many of my colleagues, we had to enter into some austere measures. There were budget line sweeps from the simplest line all the way up to the most populated lines. Speaking for the town of Brookhaven, a lot of our expenses are not discretionary; they're regulatory compliant. I'm happy to report at least that we maintain or continue to meet our obligations from a regulatory perspective. Again, like many of my colleagues, we employ a robust curbside collection program. We have 178 collections each year, of which 104 is garbage, 52 are recyclables, and 22 are yard waste or green waste. Our curbside this year is up. Curbside MSW rather is up about 12%. We saw our biggest jump was in March and April, and that was about 27% each month. It seemed to flatten out a little bit. Again, like many of my colleagues here, it was an incredible stress test on our carders, because what most people fail to realize is a lot of these folks experienced the same issues that we had with COVID illnesses and the fear resulting from the COVID and trying to get people to come to work was a pretty challenging feat for them. But again, we do have real good relationships with our partners, municipal partners and vendors and contractors, and again, Covanta and Ketchum, who manage our transfer station. They did an outstanding job. Our commercial waste, our residential waste was up significantly, and, they were able to maintain all the waste within the building. And, guys, it's Q in, Q out, right? It becomes a challenge if you can't get rid of the material, but they did a great job stacking and tiering the material up, and we worked very closely with the DEC to ensure that we did it in a manner that didn't result in any violations or fines. We expedited our odor control system. We don't typically open it up that early, but we decided to do so because we had an awful lot of waste in there. Again, the resulting is bringing back ash, and part of those austere measures was we cut back on a lot of our overtime, and we had a significant reduction in staff. Just like many of you guys probably went through, and we were able to work with Covanta on the receipt of the ash, which is pretty tough because the material comes in pretty steady every day, all the time. And as a result of not having money in overtime or not having employees, we had to make arrangements with them, and they worked with us very closely, and we were able to get through it, which was another huge challenge to overcome. Our green waste is up 29%, almost 30% on yard waste collections. We do 22 of them a year, but again, with people being home in March and April, it seemed like everybody got an early jump. We were hoping that it would flatten out, but apparently it didn't, and so the material continues to come in. I'll be honest, I'm only tracking my numbers right now until the end of July. I have a separate tracking for this storm, but I'm sure we're going to be in for a rude awakening with the storm debris. We're currently running, all day into the evening to try to get the material cleaned up and get it cleaned out. Our recycles are definitely up. Again, it's probably a result from people being home and as everyone else said here, drinking and buying on Amazon. We went through a transition in our recycling program. We have a new operator. The new operator hired a new manager doing a really good job. They invested an awful lot of money in the capital improvements. And so we're pretty happy about the way that's going. The material's pretty cleaned up, and the Winter Brothers are doing a pretty good job on running that. From an operational perspective, like everybody else, we began the crisis with 25% staffing, and then we upped it to 50 or 75%. But that was town-wide, so it wasn't necessarily my department. And so, like other departments, there were some times where we suffered more than the other departments, and there were times where the other departments suffered more than us. We embarked on this year with an aggressive CapEx spending plan. We had four major projects that were going on. We were doing construction of a new landfill, partial cap of an old one. We did an H2O2 hydrogen peroxide injection system for our leachate, and continued to construct a new flare. It was, a bit of a problem when this happened, and we had to slow things down a little bit. I think we're pretty much caught up right now. We're back on a normal pace. From our perspective, I think the only issue, not only with our CapEx projects, but our revenue, is that there's not going to be enough time in the year to make up the difference or the loss. But we're hopeful that things get a little better moving forward into the fourth quarter of this year, and we can get through this year. I guess I'm not telling any secrets or telling anything out of school, but we all anticipate that 2021 is probably going to be as challenging as 2020, at least from a financial perspective, because we're all going to have to play catch up from 2020. But, look, I think a big part of our job is crisis management. We've come to see that over the last couple of years, and so we'll meet them head on. Thanks, Mike.
Great job, Chris. Thanks very, very much. And moving on to our final municipal update today from the town of Southold, we have Jim Bunchuck. Jim is in his 30th year as solid waste coordinator for the town of Southold, position in which he managed the progression of the town's solid waste management program from the end of open dumping days to capping a landfill, the operation of a modern transfer station for waste and recyclables, as well as Long Island's third largest yard waste composting facility. He helped plan and has overseen the implementation of key program elements required to support the transformation of Long Island's first pay-as-you-throw system. expansion of recycling and special handling programs, development of a series of intermunicipal and private service agreements, ensuring regulatory compliance, directing public outreach, all along with the related managerial and administrative activities required of his job. Prior to working in SOUTHOLD, Jim worked in the private sector in Washington, D.C., in the environmental field, dealing with hazardous waste, renewable energy, and information projects. Jim, as promised, for being the last speaker today, I gave you a second slide. You just have about 2 minutes to talk about it, though. That's the only condition. I'm just kidding. Jim, you're up, and then we'll have our questions and answer session for anyone that's interested.
Okay, thanks, Mike, and everybody for joining the call, and to the Liblit organization for keeping us all connected this way. It's a great idea, and with more sessions to come, I think we'll be able to learn even more. I guess based on the background you mentioned, I think my facility here, or the town of SOUTHOLD, probably has the dubious distinction of being the last town to have open dumping on Long Island for solid waste. And they were dragged kicking and screaming from that position, I can tell you. Anyway, the facility is really one of part of a solid waste management district. It was set up as a special district in the early 90s. Theoretically, well, it was to provide a dedicated revenue stream, but also the real reason for it was Fisher's Island, which is a part of the town of SOUTHOLD, even though it's only a couple of miles off the Connecticut coast, didn't want to pay for the upcoming millions of dollars of expenses in capping and closing the Cutchogue landfill. So they had to be split off because they're taxpayers into the general tax base. So we became a special district at that time. But anyway, the operation consists of the recycling center, or the recycling transfer station, solid waste transfer station, a C&D transfer operation, and what is, I believe, the third largest municipal yard waste compost facility, which in the storms we've had since I've been here, we are very glad to have. As far as the impact of COVID, which is, clearly the big thrust today, out here we saw a very rapid and intense ramping up of the seasonal population, which typically doubles the town's population. It's around 30,000 year-round, so we probably go to 60, maybe even more, if we include the day trippers and people like that, all generating waste. Well, that doesn't usually happen until late June when school gets out, beginning of July. This year it happened in March, and they haven't left, and the evidence seems to be that with people able to work from home remotely, a lot of them may not leave. There's a lot of second homeowners out here. I think a lot of people brought friends and family that they don't, are not that familiar with the East End. And I say that because the people who come to this facility, and the transfer station is a self-haul facility. I should point out the town of SOUTHOLD does not, contrary to I think every other town that's spoken today, we do not provide taxpayer-funded curbside garbage collection. Residents out here, if they want that, they hire a local carter, of which there are several. If they don't want to pay the cost of someone coming to their house, they can come to this facility. The transfer station is open 7 days a week, 10 hours a day. So we're definitely available. And the people who've been coming in this year, more than ever, have no idea what recycling rules are, because where they came from, it may have been taken care of by a carter for them or by a municipality. They're not familiar with our system at all. So that's been sort of an interesting development that we've had to deal with. About 45% of people choose that option of being self-haulers. And I'm glad Marty said something before about the health and safety aspect. We have, at our scales, a 20% increase in scale traffic. I think the number is about 60 some odd thousand scale visits this year so far. That's a lot of traffic. And, people coming out here from New York City, which was regarded as the epicenter in the early days of the pandemic, that caused a lot of concern on the part of our scale operators. We didn't have extra plexiglass in place. You know, we had hand sanitizer and masks and whatnot, but that's a lot of transactions every day. Sometimes we're doing as many as 800 cars a day in a 10-hour day at the scale, the vehicles and you know, trucks and cars. So early on, my position was we were allowing everybody in with whatever waste they had, including yard waste. And my feeling was, well, you know, this is an emergency. People trimming their yards, you know, making them look nice should not be a priority. And I argued that we shut that down and only handle waste, C&D waste and MSW. That was accepted for one day when a decision was made, well, if that's the issue at the scale, then let's just make yard waste free. So, okay, I guess that did solve that problem as far as dealing with people and their transactions. So that's the way it's been, and actually it's still yard waste for non-commercial users is still free today, and partly due to the storm we had as well. But that did give a lot of concern to our staff, so we made some improvements there, again, with the extra barriers, and over time, it seems to have relaxed that concern. But the other thing we did impact here, certain services, the clothing bins, we have textile, I think according to Big Brothers Big Sisters of Long Island, they collect more clothing here than any other single stop. And it is busy, but those were closed. They weren't being serviced. We also have the St. Vincent de Paul boxes. Those were also not serviced. Got a lot of calls about that. People are hanging on to stuff that they want to get rid of, and they didn't want to throw it in the garbage. They've been trained not to. They don't feel good about throwing out something that's reusable, so they held on to it for the most part. And then when they opened, they were kind of swamped initially. And reuse area, I know that's a minor thing maybe for some people, but the most popular spot at this facility is the weekend reuse area, where people can bring in items, all kinds of household items, bicycles, you name it, anything that someone else can use. It's free, and it's open every weekend. Well, it's a real gathering place, and people don't come there to just quickly look and leave. They want to hang out. So we have not reopened that, and we actually get more calls about that than anything else, just about. We canceled our special waste events. We do paper shredding 3 times a year for people, and the household hazardous waste. We did hold the first, after the pandemic, the first HHW drop-off day last week, and that went well, again, following new protocols with the residents staying in their vehicles and the contractor handling everything, taking stuff out of the vehicles without interacting closely with the residents. And again, demand on user assistance and direction. Like I said, people here, you know, a lot of people here are brand new to this facility, never been here before, and have needed a lot of you know, guidance. As far as the recyclables, everybody's showing, you know, the commercial waste down, which it was, especially early on, down around 40% in the first 3 months. Now, to date, through August 16th, we're down about 23%. And the June 1st to August 16th period, it's down 11%. So it's definitely coming back. Residential waste up 67%, and that's really the effect of people with their second homes who have the option of staying here for an extended period of time. And I'll tell you what really saved us here was our pay-as-you-throw system, the town garbage bag system. That, you know, those bags pay the cost. The purchase of the bags is you know, pays the cost of the waste disposal, and there is you know, we really didn't have to worry about an increase and how we were going to pay for it. I foolishly didn't anticipate a pandemic when I did the budget last August, so I'm glad we had the pay-as-you-throw. And there are some, I think that's going to dawn on some people who may have felt, you know, it'd be nice if we could get rid of that system, because some people don't like it. But it's this year has made us not suffer as badly as we would have. On our recyclables, paper up about 12%, plastic and cans 38%, and glass 44%. Again, the the drinking of various refreshments is definitely to blame. You can definitely see with the self-haulers, what our friends and neighbors are doing. So, and as far as going forward, and that's kind of the issue where I see us having to try to predict or deal with real uncertainty. We don't know how long the increased population is going to be here. There's some evidence that local school enrollments have significantly increased, meaning that many of the visitors may not intend to go back. And not only for the pandemic or learning that they can work remotely if indeed they are working, but with what we see happening in parts of the city. I have a daughter in Brooklyn. Maybe people have other reasons they may not want to go back to New York. So that causes, of course, waste issues. It causes traffic issues. It causes budgetary issues. How to, plan for this or how much we should plan. And as I mentioned, we don't have curbside collection, but if it is a new normal and our population is going to be permanently increased, and trying to deal with the influx of users here, maybe consideration of collection districts. It comes up once in a while, but usually gets tamped down. It certainly would be more efficient in various ways. But again, when you have thousands of new visitors coming in, it does take concerted time and effort on our staff to deal with them, not only to deal with them to give direction, but also to deal with stuff they leave behind and things not put in the right spot, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of that, and maybe down the road, if this is going to stay this way, it's time to start thinking about moving in that direction. And I could say some other things. Actually, as real briefly, Doug, maybe we can help you out with the any budgetary issues there. I think you and Vicki should be coming up with a new CPI adjustment for our exports to Babylon. So that might help a little. Just throw that out there. So as for us, that's kind of our situation, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about it. And if anybody has any questions, they can certainly bring them on. But thanks, Mike, for the opportunity, and for everybody for joining in on this. I think this is a good system here to have everybody stay in touch. So.
Jim, thanks very much. We appreciate the update. You're sounds like you're definitely seeing that on the East End a little more than perhaps towns west. So I apologize to everybody that we're running a little bit late, but there's definitely a lot to talk about from all the different towns. Before I hand it off to Eric Swenson for the question and answer session, I just want to remind everybody that on September 16th, we'll have our next webinar. It's Managing Food Waste and Other Organics, followed by another one on September 30th, Transportation, Moving Waste Around and Off Long Island, and our sixth installment, which will be on October 14th, which is Waste to Energy on Long Island. So just a quick thanks again to all of our participants from the different towns, to Eric and to Caitlin for your assistance today. Eric, you can take it away.
Thank you, Mike. We did have one question that came in through the chat, and so I'm going to unmute Kendall Christensen if you want to ask a question. Hold on a second here. Okay, I think she's unmuted. Kendall, are you there? Okay. Maybe she stepped away. Her question was basically in the very beginning is regarding the recyclables that are collected now. She wanted to know if any of them are able to be managed on Long Island, or are they all being shipped off? I'll open it up to anybody.
I'll just chime in on that one. No, go ahead, Chris.
I mean, if you're asking if they're marketed on Long Island, I don't know of anybody that's actually end using the material on Long Island. The PET gentleman, I'm sorry, his name eludes me. He was on the last Zoom seminar that we had. I believe he he sells the PET as a raw material, but short of that, I can't think of anyone that's actually using the material locally. I think it's all going to manufacturing processes that are off the island.
Does anybody have anything different? Anybody using?
Well,
products
Eric, maybe, I mean, I'm saying I'm not 100% sure, but I know the metal we sent to Gershow, and I believe he does something with it on island, if I recall. You know, I mean, our glass, I mean, that's a recyclable material. We keep that on island because I do it into the Blydenburg landfill as an admixture to cover. So there's another example of a recycling component that stays on island.
I mean, I also want to thank all the speakers because I think it really helps for everybody to know what everybody else is doing, and we can all help each other, you know, as need be. And I also want to reiterate that, you know, we seem to be getting used to handling crises. Our first symposium last year was to deal with the recycling market crises. This year we have a pandemic, and we've got a tropical storm that probably brought down more trees than Sandy. And I haven't heard any real complaints in the media about the way solid waste has been handled. So I think it's a real tribute to everybody here. But we've been talking today pretty much, you know, on just what's happening on the with the pandemic and the tropical storm, not really looking at the big picture too much. But I have one question, because I know we don't have too much time because we've gone over. But in our last seminar, it was suggested that maybe there should be a glass recycling facility on Long Island that could produce glass that could be used, say, in construction projects or road bases. I'd just like to ask the towns here, if there was such a facility, would you use the facility and would you use the end product?
You know, Eric, I'll jump in on this for 1 second. I know that Chris Andrade actually has mentioned this before, and there's been a lot of discussion on this. And I think universally it was sort of, Anthony Corr has spoken on this issue as well, that, you know, short of the state DOT and other authorities sort of requiring it, making it an actual requirement to be used, it's offered as a choice. It's often not used as a sub-base aggregate. So there needs to be something to sort of compel everybody to use it in certain applications. And I think if that happens, you know, we'll get over that hurdle of maybe the fears that certain people have about using it in certain applications. I don't know if anybody has anything else they want to add on that.
Mike, I'll just add about, in terms of manufacturing a product that can be used to substitute another product in other manufacturing projects, such as concrete and things of that sort. The only thing I'd say is that comes down to economics, right? And as long as you can produce something at $1 less than what the virgin material is costing, you know, nobody's going to use it. You know, I hate to say it, we all recognize and appreciate what the environmental benefits would be. Unfortunately, from a business person's perspective, if it's not competitive and there's no value to it to use it other than, I'll say, environmental, they're going to go with the virgin material every time. They're going to go with the cheaper material every time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, Mike, this is Jim. We are situated right next to an asphalt manufacturer, and I spoke with him at one point quite a while ago about that, and he said that they used glass before when I guess to experiment with you know, making a glass fault material, but he found it to be very abrasive, more so than sand, in whatever process or whatever machinery, you know, they were using for that. It's apparently more so than the alternative, and that was an issue for them as well.
Larry Swanson had a question related to glass, so I'm trying to unmute him. I seem to have trouble unmuting him, but he wanted to know what's happening with the glass collected in Brookhaven.
I'm sorry, Eric. Could you repeat that? I didn't hear that.
He's unmuted now. Larry, you want to ask your question?
Brookhaven has gone to a great deal of effort to have special collections stations for glass, and I was just curious what your markets are, if any, for that glass that we drop off.
Yeah, great question. And so for a long time after we instituted our satellite collection programs, which by the way are incredibly successful. I mean, the material's coming out in high quality. It's separated by color. We do make the clear color. We make a brown and a green, and then we make what they call a grand bar, depending on what the company's needs were. Unfortunately for us, Larry, the company that we're sending to went out of business. And so we're back to, grinding it ourselves and using it as an alternate cover material or drainage material on our landfill. We had an RFEI on the street before the pandemic hit. We did get interest on that. So we're trying to work our way through that. But again, as I said earlier, there is a quantity that they needed, and we certainly couldn't produce that quantity alone in Brookhaven. So we would need other people to participate in it. And truth be told, depending upon what the price is, of which we don't know what the cost of disposal would be, you can't guarantee that you can deliver them the material. So I guess the long-winded answer to that question is we're back to square one with our glass, using it as cover material and alternate material since Pace closed down.
Thank you.
Anthony Core has a question.
Oh, Mike, Eric, it's really more of a comment. We've been producing glass through the commingled operations for the last 32 years. And it's been a struggle with regard to having the municipalities endorse the product for certain applications. I will tell you, everything that's been said before has been tried and failed. As a substitution for the base cover of asphalt, it had failed. Part of that was the material wasn't properly produced or presented. That's why that failed. A sub-base, the DOT has the wording wrong, and I suggested a 2-word change that would eliminate the problem. Using it as cover at the Brookhaven Landfill, Chris Andre is doing a great job with regard to using the glass that comes in, and Brookhaven should be very proud of themselves that is technically the only recyclable that we are in fact using on Long Island. We use nothing else. Kevin manufactures a raw product to be shipped out and made into new products. I don't believe Kevin does actual finished product manufacturing. So we don't manufacture anything from start to end. I will say, because as Mike Engelman knows, as Chris Andre knows, over the years, we've promoted this for one application that has never taken. It is a substitution for drainage around piping that's perforated instead of pea gravel. And it is a better product than the pea gravel because it doesn't absorb water or elements or contaminants. In the capping of landfills, the leachate collection systems, there was a lot of application. Now we found that it's working phenomenally with regard to retaining walls. And we're doing a project with retaining walls now, and we're doing the engineering to have that as a substitute for the stone. French drains around homes and buildings was a great application. But it really takes the wherewithal of the towns and the building departments from the towns to mandate its use instead of the pea gravel. When Chris said about cost, he's absolutely right. But what's going on is very simple. If I buy stone and I don't use it, all I do is throw it in the yard of the construction project and no one cares. If I have extra glass, I have to haul it away as a waste product. And that's why they don't use it, because they can't judge how much to use effectively, and they don't want to get rid of just by burying what's left in the ground. We need to overcome some of these issues and really work together. But as I've said 30 years ago, it is absolutely a government side to this. Rockland County touts how they're using their recyclables. I've said it before in other seminars. They mandated in the construction of new buildings, you don't get your permit unless you're using it. So we should think about that and embrace it. If there's anything we can do to promote recycling, anything that Evan would have loved to see us do, would be to take at least one product that we can use. Because the metal, the aluminum, that melting process, I've been in those factories. We're not building them on Long Island. They won't be permitted. Same thing with the plastics as well. When was the last time we had a plastics plant? Didn't we have it with the old supervisor of Babylon? What was his name? Do you guys remember?
National Waste?
No, the old supervisor of Babylon.
Tony Noto's.
Tony Noto.
Pizza, there's one more piece of pizza.
Tony Noto was the last guy that made anything here from recycled material. And Tony Noto's long gone. So the glass we could step up and do something with, I believe.
Anthony Carahan has a follow-up question for you on that.
So thank you, Eric. No, Anthony, I'm very interested. I'm chair of the Suffolk County Legislature's Environment Committee, and pre-COVID had tried to pull together a recycling task force countywide that we were also going to work with Nassau County on this issue, and the building of a glass recycling facility was top of mind for everyone who was going to participate. So I would like, and I would like to discuss more separately with you, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. We're working on some technology to further process and refine the glass for the applications we're talking about. But I'm always open.
But I'm interested in those two words that the DOT should change.
They never did. They scoffed at me on the change. But,
okay, well, we'll have to talk, and we can try to move this issue. I do think the DEC has been trying to move the DOT as well.
Right. It's if you ever worked with the mines in Pennsylvania versus the EPA in Pennsylvania, it's a constant struggle. The departments don't work well together, but let's get together and talk and let's see what we can do. It's probably in this industry the one thing that I've done that I failed at in the last 30 years, and I really don't like losing. And I'm willing to continue it to try to see it succeed. And then when I get it to succeed, I'll retire.
Okay, well, Anthony, I think Evan would definitely endorse your approach, and I'm glad we were able to bring everybody together on these issues, at least to understand each other some more. So we've already gone almost a half an hour past where we intended to, and there's no more questions in the chat. So I think this is a good time to end, and thank all the speakers and thank all the people for joining us. We've had almost everybody stay the entire length of time. So thank you, and please join us again at our next seminars.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.